The autumn sun felt warm on Grace Morrison's face as she stood at the boarding gate of Skyward Airlines Flight 447. She was 58 years old with golden hair that fell just past her shoulders and kind eyes that had seen both joy and sorrow. Today, she wore her favorite brown sweater and jeans because comfort mattered more than fashion when you were flying across the country. Grace had built Skyward Airlines from nothing 30 years ago when women in aviation were rare. She started with one small plane and a dream of making flying accessible to everyone. Now her airline had 60 aircraft and flew to 40 cities, but Grace rarely revealed who she was anymore. She preferred to travel quietly and observe how her employees treated regular passengers. That morning, Grace noticed a young mother struggling with 2 small children and several bags. Without hesitation, she bent down to help the woman gather scattered toys from the airport floor. A flight attendant named Patricia hurried over, but instead of offering help, she looked annoyed. Patricia was in her early 40s with sharp features and an even sharper tone. She had worked for Skyward for only 6 months, but carried herself with unearned authority. "Ma'am, you're blocking the boarding area," Patricia said to Grace with barely concealed irritation. Grace smiled gently and said, "I'm just helping this mother with her children." Patricia's eyes narrowed as she looked Grace up and down, taking in the simple sweater and worn travel bag. "This is first-class boarding," Patricia announced loudly. "Economy passengers need to wait their turn." Grace glanced at her boarding pass and replied calmly, "I have a first-class ticket." Patricia snatched the pass from Grace's hand and examined it with suspicion. Her face reddened, and she declared, "This ticket looks irregular. I need to verify it with my supervisor." The young mother whispered to Grace, "Thank you for helping me. I'm so sorry you're having trouble." Grace squeezed her hand reassuringly and said, "Don't worry, dear. Some things have a way of working themselves out." 20 minutes passed while Patricia made phone calls and spoke in hushed, angry tones to other staff members. Finally, she returned with security officer and proclaimed, "Ma'am, this ticket cannot be verified. You need to leave the aircraft immediately." Grace felt her heart sink, not from fear, but from profound disappointment. She had built this airline on principles of dignity and respect for every passenger. Now she was being treated like a criminal because of her simple clothes and quiet demeanor. "I purchased this ticket legitimately," Grace said with quiet dignity. "Please check your system again." Patricia crossed her arms and said, "The system shows nothing. I'm going to have to ask you to deplane now." The other first-class passengers watched in uncomfortable silence. Some looked sympathetic, but nobody spoke up. The young mother started protest, but Grace shook her head, gently signaling her not to get involved. As Grace walked back up the jetway, her mind was already working. She would not reveal her identity out of anger or ego. Instead, she would let the situation unfold and see what lessons could be learned. At the gate desk, she asked to speak with the airport manager. A tired-looking man in his 50s named Robert came out from the back office. He listened to Grace's story with growing concern. Something about this woman's calm dignity told him this was no ordinary complaint. "Ma'am, I sincerely apologize," Robert said. "Let me look into this personally." He made several calls while Grace waited patiently. His expression changed from confusion to alarm to absolute horror. "Mrs. Morrison," he whispered, turning pale, "I had no idea it was you." Grace held up her hand and said, "Please don't make a scene. I just want to understand what happened." Robert explained that Patricia had decided Grace looked too ordinary to belong in first class. She had voided the ticket in the system without proper authorization. It was a clear violation of company policy and basic human decency. Grace asked, "Has she done this before?" Robert hesitated, then admitted, "We had 3 complaints in the past month from passengers who felt discriminated against." Grace felt a weight in her chest. This was exactly what she had feared as her company grew. Some employees forgot that every passenger deserved respect regardless of appearance or ticket class. She asked Robert to arrange a meeting with Patricia in a private office. When Patricia arrived, she still looked defiant until she saw Robert's grave expression. "Patricia," Grace began softly, "do you know why we started this airline?" The flight attendant looked confused and shook her head. Grace continued, "I started Skyward because I was once denied a job as a pilot, because I was a woman. People looked at me and decided I wasn't good enough without knowing anything about my skills or character. I built this company on the belief that everyone deserves dignity and a chance to be heard. Patricia's face began to change as understanding slowly dawned. When you look at passengers, what do you see? Grace asked. Patricia stammered. I see people who need to follow rules and respect authority. Grace shook her head sadly. That's where we failed you then. You should see human beings with stories and struggles and dreams just like your own. She paused and then said, Patricia, I'm Grace Morrison. I own this airline. The flight attendant's face went white and her hands began to shake. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. Grace replied gently, That's exactly the problem. You treated me poorly because you didn't know who I was. But you should treat every passenger with respect regardless of who they are. Patricia began to cry and said, I've been so stressed, and I took it out on people. I'm ashamed. Grace reached across the table and took the young woman's hand. We all make mistakes, she said. The question is what we learn from them. Over the next hour, Grace learned that Patricia was going through a difficult divorce. She had been working double shifts to make ends meet, and her stress had turned into bitterness. Grace listened with compassion, remembering her own struggles as a young woman. She arranged for Patricia to take paid leave to sort out her personal issues. She also enrolled her in customer service training and paired her with a mentor. I'm giving you a second chance, Grace said, but you must promise to see the humanity in every person you meet. Patricia nodded through tears and said, Thank you, I won't let you down. 3 months later, Grace took another flight on her airline, traveling economy this time. Patricia was working that flight, and when she saw Grace, her eyes filled with gratitude. She served every passenger with warmth and genuine care. After landing, Patricia approached Grace and said, You changed my life by showing me kindness when I deserved punishment. Grace smiled and replied, We all deserve kindness, especially when we've lost our way. As Grace walked through the airport that day, she felt grateful. Grateful that she had been thrown off that plane. Grateful for the reminder that success means nothing if we forget to treat each other with dignity. And grateful that even at 58, she was still learning that the most powerful thing we can offer another person is grace. Not the grace of her name, but the grace of understanding, forgiveness, and second chances. That's what makes us truly human in the end. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Leave a comment below about a time when someone showed you kindness.